Okay, so basically today I wanted to summarise my proposal. So although I've got my written plan and all of that, I thought it'd be quite helpful just to have a quick summary, so then if I do need to refer back to it, I won't need to read all of that and I can just watch this, hopefully, short video. So, first of all, I want to start off with my genre for my magazine. I've chosen fashion as I feel as though it is a statement of expression, and that it can be quite personal and it can be quite out there, and that quite a lot of people can relate to different types of fashion. Thinking about fashion magazines themselves, like Vogue and things, most of their outfits are eye-catching, for one, but I think it would be interesting to see if I could still get that eye-catching but then still relatable to other people. Moving on to my conventions. So for the front cover, I know that I want to stick as close to a real magazine as I can. This is because I know that a magazine can look a little bit childlike if you go too far away from the codes and conventions for that, which isn't really what I want to do. It just won't be good. The only things which I may think about is the taglines, so positioning and all of that, although there isn't set convention for them. The date and price, so if I do want to keep it under the masthead at the bottom right hand corner, and the composition for the whole page. But thinking about it, there's not a set example for all of them. They're quite different depending on the type of magazine or the magazine itself. So moving on to the contents page, what I'm going to be keeping is the colour scheme. So I want to make sure that everything has a link and that you can really see my house style coming through. I also want to make sure that you can see the date and issue. Not over the top, but I still think it's important so that it can have that relation between the front cover and the contents page, which is used quite a lot on and in real magazines themselves. I also will be keeping the article titles and article descriptions. This because it's such a key point or part for the contents page themselves, it would be stupid to try and take that out. And finally, it's the same, the date. I really want to keep that just so it can have that link. The things which I'm thinking about changing is the layout. So I don't know if I want to have a collage on part of the page and then do just individual images elsewhere, or if I want to have all my text in the middle and then have images around the outside. I don't really want to go for something which is it everywhere. So if that means going over my rule of thirds for my page or something like that. I know that for one thing I want to change my images, so I'm not on about resizing them or anything, I'm talking about the saturation level. So I will be decreasing the saturation on all of my images except for my main one, just so then it really stands out. I know that not many magazines, or at least the ones which I've seen, don't do this. I'm considering the idea of a background, just because it might, I don't know, when I'm looking at the magazine itself, I feel as though the contents page itself looks a little bit down just because of the white background. I'll have to play around with that, but I'm not sure I want to just go for plain white. Then I'm not sure about the masthead, actually writing contents itself. I'm debating whether I want that to be large and imposing or very small or anything like that. Moving on to the double pages, I know that I want to keep the majority of it, so like the pull quote, the colour scheme, the image captions, the page numbers, which I forgot to mention this, on my contents page, I'm debating whether I want to include them or not. Anyway, for my double pages, I know that I need my numbers to be quite large, and I don't want them to be small. My main image, I'm debating, because I've seen a mix of magazines. Some magazines choose to do a very large and imposing image, but then others choose to do lots of individual ones. I think that I'm mainly going to go for a large image and maybe have a small collage of some other images, but I think I want one main image at the minimum. And then obviously I'm going to keep the drop cap and article body itself. Things that I may be changing is basically the first stand. I think that's about it. Just so then if I do want to have that in the conventional place, which would be above the article descriptor, or if I want it to be a little less centered or a little off focus, but we'll see. Moving on to the appeal for my magazine, what I want to appeal for my magazine is the colours, language, my featured people, my models, and perhaps the clothes, depending. By this I'm meaning if I did a double page on, say, I don't know, Andy Murray, just for example, I'd want to not as much focus on the clothing in the article itself, but I'd want to talk about how maybe he has a secret hobby for cooking behind the whole tennis thing and all of that, just so then you can see a different side of people and stuff. But then obviously in the images themselves you would be able to see his clothing and all of that. I know that for my colour scheme, I'm thinking like a pinky purpley colour, maybe some greys and some blacks, but I think that's what I want my main colour to be like. For moving on to the fonts, I know that I do want something a bit curly, but not, I don't know the word for it, but super curly. I don't really want that, so I'll have to find that balance between where's okay and where's too much. I'm also considering to use something a bit edgier or sharper, but I don't think I will go for this, as it won't really set with my tone or my house style. For my image styles, I know that I want them to be bold, vivid, striking. I don't want there to be, I want it to be quite an artistic photo, so I don't want it just to be, so if this was a photo right now, I wouldn't want it to be white background, just this, because that's not even playing with the shadows or the lighting or the angles or anything like that. I do want to use quite interesting. If I'm not, I at least want there to be a direct address, not just to the camera, but say to the left or to the right. But we'll see. Moving on to the target audience. I know that I'm thinking around 14 to 25, just because I feel as though the styles which I'm choosing are a bit younger and moving and just relaxed, and that maybe the older demographic wouldn't be great for this. So that's why I'm thinking around that area, 14 to 25. Not the only issue. One of my points is that for my designer features, I may include some of more top-end brands, but then I will make sure that I'll get some more middle-class brands. So if that's like H&M or whatever, just then there's a bit of a range, because I know that between that age band they won't have a lot of money to spend on clothes and stuff, but then they'll still get some. When it comes to the demographics, I'm thinking for the social grade that I want a C1, a B, or maybe an A, mainly around that B area though. This is just because of their disposable income and how much they can actually spend on other things, on whatever they want, after they pay all of their taxes and do all of that. Talking about the gratification theory, which is basically just personal identity, I want my models, feature people, to be almost like an icon to show that people can express how they feel or how they look or whatever they do through the use of fashion, because I feel that's quite a good skill if you can learn and master how to do it. Talking about the psychographics, I'm thinking more mainstreamers or aspirers, just because if you're in that age bracket, obviously you'll have some money, so you'll be able to get some of the clothes, but then they'll also be aspirers because they'll want to get to those top brands like, I don't know, Gucci or whatever. Moving on to the mode of address. In the interview, obviously, I will use first person for their bits, but then I'm thinking that I'm going to mix my informal and formal writing, just so then there's a little bit of variation. Okay, moving on now to the subscription offers. The idea what I've got at the moment is codes for online shopping, as this is quite new and it's really easy for lots of young people to get clothes if they don't really want to go to a proper shop. And a lot of people nowadays do shop online for the most of stuff instead of going out, which I'm not sure if that is a good thing or not, but it's what happens. My thoughts is that I can also put links, or whatever you want to call them, from the clothes which are featured in my magazine to where and what website they can get it from themselves. So say someone was wearing a really nice pair of jeans and then someone was like, oh okay, I want to get some of them. They could click on the code if they've got the online version, or scan the thing, maybe the QR code actually, for a hard copy. I'm not sure, I'm going to think about it. Or even a link to the website. Just so then they know where it's been bought from and they can have an idea for themselves. Now, talking about the release frequency, if I relate back to my oh my god, what's it called? My survey, audience survey, although there were a few anomalies, like people were like, yeah, I want one every week, that's not really realistic. That's why I'm going to go with the majority of what people said, and I'm going to go for the once a month. This is what quite a lot of other magazines do, as it makes sure that it is frequent enough for people to keep interested, but then it's not so often that the quality of the magazine will go down. I think that this is quite important, and yeah. Turns out that 46% of the people who I asked said once a month, which is pretty interesting. Also, if it's on once a month, it means that you can pay attention to the really small details, and you can make sure that it is absolutely perfect, which is the best thing. Moving on to the price, I'm going to refer back to my audience survey again. I think I'm going to go for the £4 to £5 bracket. This is because, again, the largest amount of people were in this section, and I think that's where the best thing would be. So 38% of my people who I asked said that they would pay £4, and 28% would pay £5. I feel as though that bracket is actually a decent amount of price, bearing in mind that Vogue, for example, I know I keep using them, but anyway, the majority of their issues are, I think it's £4.99, but then their special edition ones are £9 something or other. So the majority of their issues are around that price as well, which is okay actually, I think. I don't want people to have to pay £6, especially if I'm going for that younger-ish demographic, as they won't have that money to spend every single week. Talking about the distribution, as I started to mention before, I will be doing an online copy. So if they subscribe and then they have the purchase and pay for a year, like that again. Sorry about that, the camera just cut out. Basically, for my distribution, I know that I want to do an online version as well as having it in some shops. I know that I want to do it online, as most of my demographic will have some type of software. So if that's a laptop, a Mac, an iPhone, a pad, a tablet, whatever, they'll have something, so they'll be able to access the internet and we'll be able to see it. If they prefer an actual magazine which you can flip through, they'll have them in some of the hard copies. I think it's nice to have that option to get one in the shop, just because then for some customers, they like that gratification of going into the shop themselves and picking it out and trying it, rather than just shopping online. So I think it's important to have that mix, so then people can choose what they want. Moving on to the publisher, I know that I want Condé Nast. I think I'm saying that wrong. I'm going to write it here because I think I've said that wrong quite badly actually. Okay, this is only because of their reputation and that they've got good connections to other magazines. This means that they already have the right strategies to sell, and it would be quite easy to start up a new magazine and be quite successful, I think. Okay. Talking about free content, I think I would have this as a yes and no. I don't think it's a very straightforward answer. So I know that I would definitely, to start off with, because say people subscribe for 2 or 1 years, I will give a free copy at the beginning just to show them that this is what they're going to be getting and that it is worth their money. It's also just something to give back to the audience if they're paying that much money for a subscription. But on the other hand, I don't think that I will be giving free content out on every single one of my magazines. This is just because it would cost the magazine itself a lot more, and I'm not sure that would be great. Before I forget, I know that my subscription themselves, because if you pay for it individually each month, not each week, it would be around £60. So I think that the subscription is going to be £55. Just then it will entice more people to actually go for it. But we never know. Maybe I'll increase the price to 70, depending on how we're feeling. Anyway, back to why I wouldn't. It would basically just cost the company too much, or the magazine too much, to be doing it every week. At least until you've got a good reputation and you've started up and you've made your place, I think. Moving on to the promotions, I think I don't want only online advertising. This is because people do go outside. They have a life. And I think it would be stupid to limit yourself to just above the line advertising types. Why wouldn't you do some below the line? So by below the line, I'm talking about cup advertising. So someone gets a Starbucks. On it they'll say magazine blah blah blah, and you can go here. I think that'd be a nice idea. If there were, say, posters, or even like verbal communication, so if there was a magazine signing by an influencer. That's one thing which I do want to stress, is that I think an influencer, especially for the younger demographics, is really important. As it sounds, young people are more influenced than older people. I am also going on to above the line now. I think that I want to have a website, so then if people want to sign up or give suggestions for what we should include in the magazine, or the buyers section, we'll see. And then obviously include adverts on Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, all of them. I think it also might be interesting to host an event with the influencer. I think that might be quite interesting. This moves me on to my next point quite nicely, actually, how I would gain attention. So I'm thinking that on the open day, we would give out free copies. I think that this is a really good way to get the magazines out there, and it will enable people to see the type of stuff which is in the magazine, and then obviously if someone else is reading it across the room, other people look because we're nosy, like that. Just happens, we move on. I think that would be a really good way to get around the magazine as it opens. Obviously we're going to really promote the push on television, not really television actually, because everyone skips adverts, on social media and stuff like that. And as I mentioned before, you need to have the influencers, just because young people are really influenced. How I'm going to maintain interest is that I really want to have interesting content. That's why I think that the title or the masthead of the magazine is so important, because it does intrigue people in. If it's like, oh, okay, what's that about? So that's really important. I also think that it is right to include the right people. So you can't just choose. So I'm on about making sure, or talking about people's hidden talents. You can't just choose people which are like, oh yeah, I like running. Alright, I think most of us do at some point. Oh yeah, I don't know, I like swimming, something like that. I think it's got to be more out there and difficult things to do, such as horse riding or dancing or anything like that, because that takes a lot of skill and practice, and it looks amazing when people are doing it. Okay, and I think that wraps it up for my summary for my... Okay, so I think that sums it up for my proposal.